thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with Part 2, The Secret Teachings of the Rosicrucians, of Orders of the Universal Reformation, by Manly P. Hall. The Adepts, Orders of Universal Reformation, The Secret Teachings of the Rosicrucians. Although it is believed generally that the Brothers of the Rosy Cross were Theosophists and mystics, very little is known about their esoteric doctrines. Contrary to popular opinion, the members of the fraternity never made a formal statement of their teachings, and no satisfactory account with reasonable claims to validate is known to exist, because important names identified with the early activities of the society are always associated with astrology, alchemy, Kabbalism, and classic philosophy. It has been assumed that the Rosicrucians were devoted to such speculations. Actually, the manifestos of the order do not convey the impression that these elusive brethren were addicted to any branch of popular metaphysics. The burden of the original proclamations is one of a broad reform covering art, science, religion, and politics. The means by which this reform was to be accomplished was through the codification of knowledge and the preparation of a universal textbook of encyclopedic proportions. Religious references, strongly influenced by Protestantism, are for the most part pious and orthodox, conveying the impression that the society was devout and conservative. The Lutheran flavor is attributed to the activities of Andre. It was not until the 18th century, with its emphasis upon the miraculous, that the Brothers of the Rosy Cross lost their sober habits and emerged in the extravagant habiliments of magic and mystery. There are certain reasonable questions about the doctrines of the Rosy Cross that may never be reasonably answered. Would-be historians have built elaborate assumptions and hypotheses upon vague and conflicting intimations, but in spite of all pretenses to the contrary, the secrets of the original society have been neither exposed nor revealed. There is every indication that the Rosicrucians should be included among the early humanists. Certainly they advocated the reformation of society, universal education, and the rights of man. In achieving a general definition, the details are comparatively unimportant. All human institutions divided into two groups. Either they advocate a doctrine of special privileges, thus favoring some entrenched class, or else they advocate a doctrine of equal opportunity, in this way seeking the general improvement of mankind. The humanists were champions of the cause of equal opportunity through the enlargement of knowledge. The fama of the Rosy Cross definitely aligns the order with those particular utopians of every age who have labored in the threefold cause of liberty, equality, and fraternity. The humanists inherited the unfinished labors of the heretics, who preceded them as champions of human rights. After the Reformation, the Order of the Quest gradually took on a new appearance. They became the Orders of the Great Work. Prior to the Reformation, the philosophic empire was concerned principally with the survival of knowledge. Once, however, the backbone of ecclesiastical authority had been broken and the power of the church to destroy utterly all nonconformists had been lost. The heretics emerged as humanists. The essential doctrine remained the same. It was still the heresies of the Manichaeans, the Albigenses, and the troubadours, and the adversary was not completely discomfited. Neither the church nor the state was in a position to preach a crusade, but each did everything possible to impede the progress of intellectual liberalism. It was still necessary to maintain a degree of secrecy, especially regarding means. but it was possible to speak more empathetically about the ends to be accomplished. The metaphysical-minded have completely overlooked the social and political aspects of Rosicrucianism, but we shall never understand the society correctly until we recognize its place as an agent of the intellectual revolution. Having accomplished its purpose, the original society seems to have been absorbed into the very stream of progress which it had helped to release. When the reforms it advocated were generally accepted and applied, the original fraternity vanished completely from the theater of European affairs. The later mystical groups using the same name do not seem to have been able to establish their descent from the original body. When we penetrate the aura of metaphysical speculation, which has surrounded the society for nearly 300 years, we find that the Rosicrucians were dedicated to a particular and necessary program, which can be summarized as follows. 1. The renovation of all human knowledge, with emphasis upon the discovery of causes, learning to be dedicated to the security of all men and not to remain merely a plaything for the amusement and the amazement of mind. 2. The restoration of those ancient mystical and philosophical systems by which humanity could be inclined towards a state of mutual understanding and spiritual integrity. This phase of the program included a purification of all existing faiths and a reinstatement of the primitive and universal religion. 3. The enlargement and perfection of the arts, by which the power of beauty could be released as a civilizing force. 4. The political reformation of states towards a philosophic commonwealth, the end to be one nation, one people, one faith, and one work. The illusion of competition was to be dispelled by the reality of a magnificent program of cooperation. 5. The creation among the learned of a permanent organization dedicated to essential progress, devoted to all branches of useful knowledge and capable of providing a perpetual incentive for human progress. 6. The maintenance of whatever degree of secrecy necessary to protect those dedicated to the program from the persecutions instigated by reactionaries and from those desiring to enslave man for personal power and profit. 7. The accomplishment of all reformation without such revolutions as endanger the life and property of the private citizen. The principal instrument of the Reformation was to be education. The wise man cannot be enslaved and the ignorant man cannot be freed. 8. The end should be the application of all tradition, experience, and knowledge to the perfection of the human state and estate. The great work was the perfect adjustment of human purpose with the divine plan, through the understanding of the laws of nature and the practice of an enlightened code based upon the threefold foundation of philosophy, science, and religion. Naturally, such a comprehensive project could not be brought into a state of objective existence without a deep-laid plan and a long-range program. And machinery must be set up capable of surviving the vicissitudes of social change over vast periods of time. It would be most unlikely that any generation would voluntarily accept the whole design or dedicate itself to the immediate accomplishment of such a reformation. The first step was to inform the private citizen of his personal potentials. He must see himself as capable of attaining to a state of security. He must then be educated to desire such a state. And lastly, he must be supplied with a practical means for attaining his newly envisioned purpose. In substance, this was the program of humanism, and through such secret assemblages as the Rosicrucians, this vision of the shape of things to come was introduced to an astonished world unaccustomed to think beyond the desperate emergencies of the moment. the fact that outstanding alchemists, astrologers, and metaphysical philosophers are among those suspected of membership in the original Rosicrucian order must not be used as the basis for too large a generalization. These transcendentalists were the outstanding liberals of their time, and were by nature included to such serious thinking. Such men had the abilities and capacities most likely to advance a liberal program of idealistic education and research. Each also had a considerable sphere of influence and the means of contracting other progressives in the several arts and sciences. Some, in all probability, also belonged to esoteric organizations already functioning, and through such connections could spread the new tidings throughout Europe. It required serious men for a serious undertaking. The groups dominated by the church and state, and this included the universities, along with the reactionaries. The orthodox schools, scientific and theological, were persecuting all liberals. The astrologers, Kabbalistics, and alchemists were the heretics of science, and heresy is often synonymous with progress. Formal institutions, dominated by conservative traditions then as now, had no practical solution for the prevailing corruptions and injustices. They devoted much of their energy to attacking liberals and discrediting unorthodox theories and practices. Recruits for the philosophic empire had to be drawn from the stratum of brilliant minds which had rejected scholastic authority. These truth seekers, realizing that accepted methods had failed, were seeking in the esoteric tradition of antiquity for the lost keys of operative wisdom. It should also be remembered that the alleged Rosicrucians were really identified only as apologists, and not as actual members of the fraternity. They wrote tracts and a few larger works endorsing the objectives of the Brethren of the Rosy Cross and offering themselves to its service. It would be unwise to assume that the society practiced all the convictions of these applicants and supplicants. Intellectuals of every class made bids for membership, and including Catholics, Protestants, Jews, adventurers, soldiers, artisans, physicians, and lawyers, but as not as one of these would-be joiners had any actual knowledge of the fraternity or its teachings. Their notions, apologies, explanations, and interpretations cannot be accepted as conclusive evidence of anything except their own zeal. If the rose of the troubadours became the crucified rose of the Rosicrucians, the society was attempting to accomplish a transmutation in the world of learning. Man could not be free until he developed the capacity to practice freedom. Equality cannot be bestowed, it must be earned. To be earned, it must be available, and to be available, it must be preserved from the antisocial forces bent upon the enslavement of the human mind. Although the Rosicrucians remained unknown, the very rumor of the existence of the order caused widespread consternation among reactionaries of every station and conviction. Those with uneasy conscience developed appropriate phobias. Some feared that the Knights Templars had returned to haunt their executioners. The blood that had been shed by the Inquisition cried out for vengeance. Torture, disgrace, and death had not destroyed heresy, and the ghost of the martyrs waned about in the night, pointing accusing fingers at the men, the institutions, and the doctrines responsible for the enslavement of countless millions. It was not alone the strength of the fraternity of the Rosy Cross which made this order appear so formidable. Rather, it was the weakness of guilty men who knew they deserved a heavy punishment for their misdeeds. It is not our intention to imply that the Rosicrucians were simply political reformers. The project which they prepared required profound knowledge of spiritual sciences and breadth of vision possible only to those internally enlightened. It seems unwise, however, to regard them merely as theosophical or alchemical philosophers dedicated to abstract speculation about God, nature, and man. If we may believe their apologists, the adepts of the society were the custodians of a secret science of human regeneration. It is by virtue of this esoteric doctrine that they belong to the descent of the adept tradition. It is important, however, not to accept their published statements relating to magical and wonderful works without considering the possibility that these descriptions are to be understood symbolically and philosophically. A little thoughtfulness along these lines would have prevented many extravagant notions. The initiates of the Rosy Cross should be regarded as a race of heroes, citizens of a secret commonwealth dedicated to the advancement of the human state, and not wonder-mongerers, as they were branded by their early critics. According to the old documents, the brothers possessed a key, that is, a method, a particular program for the accomplishment of a definite and practical end. The true substance of this method they did not reveal, but it was certainly a kind of discipline which could be applied to both the individual and the collective. Traces of such discipline are to be found in the writings of the initiated philosophers of antiquity, and the discipline itself is still preserved in the esoteric regions of Asia. It would be quite possible in a work of this kind to mislead the reader by assumptions that might appear reasonable and could be documented by recourse to popular authorities. For example, there would be no general objection to referring to Paracelsus as a Rosicrucian initiate, or identifying numerous rose-formed emblems and devices as bona fide symbols of the society. The article Rosicrucianism in the 1946 edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica represents only the claims of its author and the organization which he founded. This society should be invited to produce evidence that the name Rosicrucian, in any of its forms or spellings, appears in any printed work published prior to the opening of the 17th century, or is associated by name with any philosopher or mystic in a contemporary work before the year 1600. It seems regrettable that the Encyclopedia Britannica should present only one aspect of a very large subject. We have chosen to present such evidence as is available without exaggeration or distortion. It is not necessary to depend on any one individual or any one circumstance to sustain our concept. We present it as it appears in history, with the firm conviction that the elements of the pattern, if considered thoughtfully, will reveal the presence of an organized body of remarkably endowed persons moving behind the historical scene. The sequence of events must be preserved if an accurate estimation of the facts is to be attained. The evidence is circumstantial for obvious reasons, but the conclusions, which must appear inevitable, are impressive. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating towards the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.